Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range, talk about the use of polymers. In my hands, I have an MP5K. This is a Zenith Firearms SBR semi-automatic, but it's being used to talk about the H&K, specifically firearms. We have two of them out here that we want to talk about. Now, this thing is a classic. It's roller delayed soft shooting. And this thing is a 1960s era technology firearm based on World War II technology and manufacturing. But H&K wasn't content with this, or maybe the market wasn't content with it. So they came up with a replacement that tanked. But they also did that with the HK33, or as we know it as the HK93 here in the United States. And that thing had promise, right? It was soft shooting. It just needed a few features, which was added in the HK41. But it never really got any traction. The G36 came along. Interesting, but we're going to talk about this and the transition from metal firearms to polymer, and how is that going for companies like HK? Should be an interesting conversation. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. This is the HK93, one of my favorite rifles from my youth. The HK93 is a very iconic looking rifle. It's the 5.56 version of the HK91, which is loved as well by a lot of American shooters. And this is the same as the MP5, right? It uses World War II technology, that being primarily stampings being used in the construction of the receiver and lower components and things like that. Cold hammer forged barrel, stuff like that, that HK would develop that technology during World War II and would carry it over into the Cold War. But this rifle, which saw some use, now the German military, not so much, but global sales were there. People did use this weapon system, but it wasn't as popular as something like the M16 or AK-47. And so Germany went looking for a new service rifle to replace the G3, and they didn't want to go with this. Now, this did have some limitations, right? Did not have a last round bolt hold open. The magazine release in this particular instance is, kind of an awkward place, but the flapper mag release would have been probably more common. It just wasn't, it just didn't have all the features like the Stenag magazine, stuff like that. But HK did make the HK41, which I saw a replica of that PTR is working on at the SHOT Show this year, which looks really promising, which the 41 would use. Stenag magazines have a bolt hold, all the things that we would want in a modern infantry rifle that this rifle doesn't have. But that's not what they wound up with. They went further and went past sheet metal, past aluminum, like our M16, and went straight to polymers. And we got the G36. Now, in the case of the MP5, which I opened up the video with, we got the UMP. I don't even like the name. So let's talk about those firearms that replaced these. And are they really an improvement, in my opinion? I don't know. Well, it started raining again, so we're back inside the shooting shack. We're trying to get outside. We're getting close. Anyway, so in front of me, I have two firearms, the MP5K and the HK93. Both of these are classic firearms, as I've already talked about their construction methods. Now, this one does use polymers down here, which was popular, but this one uses the old school sheet metal lowers. But these are lightweight for their era. Granted, polymers are even less heavy than things like steel that's, even stampings. But they're not heavy weapons. The only thing you could really accuse these firearms of being is not up to current standards. And again, that goes back to no last round bolt hold open. Rather awkward controls with the magazine as compared to something like the M16. Not so with the AK. The AK has similar controls in that regard. But as an American shooter, I prefer the ergonomics of the M16. And I think that's the direction NATO is going. And as evidence of that, today in 2025, as we're recording this, more and more NATO countries are adopting some version of the M16. So HK is making the 416, which is wildly popular in the world's militaries. Now, why the Germans took so long to finally adopt that, I don't know, but we'll get into that maybe in today's video. So the MP5, what makes this so cool? First of all, it's a lightweight, very controllable 9mm submachine gun in its proper trim. This is a semi-automatic, but it has a roller delay system in it. Now keep in mind, roller delays, they can be a little bit complex, a lot of small parts, little springs and little rollers and little plates and things like that. But HK being HK, really refined the weapon. It's extremely reliable. People know it for its reliability. As long as you keep the parts up to date, the guns will run just fine. So in terms of submachine guns, there's many today, even though this thing was designed in the 1960s, would say the MP5 is still the pinnacle of 9mm submachine guns, despite the fact that you have to manually lock it open and you have to rock magazines in and flapper mag releases and no last round bolt open, hold open. So there's still people out there, myself included, that think this is one of the best 9mm submachine guns ever devised. And so replacing it with something else, I don't know the backstory on that, so I'm not going to speculate. Maybe it was a tender, some military law enforcement group went to HK and said, this is what we want, and HK gave them what they wanted, or did HK come up with it on their own? We don't know. This, HK93, same thing, roller delay, nice and soft shooting. Just a generally great rifle. I mean, the recoil impulse on this thing is almost delayed. You fire it and you can feel that bolt cycling in there. Just slow and soft and easy shooting. Again, one of my favorite 5.56 rifles from back in the day. So let's take a look at the weapons that replaced these, and let's talk about how well they did. And what do I think of them? Do I think they're improvements over these? Comment down below. Do you like the G36 over the HK93? Do you like the UMP or the USC over the MP5? Let me know in the comments. Pretty soon I'm going to share my thoughts with you. All right, so here's the HK93, and this is a Tommy-built G36 replica. Now, in the United States, HK was not able to, either for political reasons, company policy, government policy, I don't know. They never gave us a proper G36, known as the 243 in Europe. Yes, they do sell semi-automatic G36s in Europe, just not in the United States. What we got in the United States was called the SL8, a single-stack magazine abomination that was just hideous. Nobody wanted it, but they were great base guns to be converted into a proper G36 clone by Tommy built. So this is what we get in the United States for G36s right now. And it's not a bad option. I like the Tommy built guns. So this is going to be our representative for the G36 and, of course, the HK93. So what are some of the things that the G36 brings to the table? Well, first of all, it is very lightweight. The polymers, the extensive use of polymers, makes this a very lightweight weapon. Now, instead of a roller delay system that we had the HK93, we go to a short stroke gas piston, an over-gassed short stroke gas piston. I fired actual G36s made by H&K on full auto. A good friend of mine collected them. He was a class 3 dealer, and it was horrible. When you compared it to an M16, which time I had a fully automatic M16, when you compared it to the M16 in terms of recoil impulse, it was night and day. The M16 was infinitely more controllable, infinitely softer shooting. The G36 was a hot mess. When you put it on full auto and just did a mag dump, the sights just disappeared. You're just spraying lead. And so with that lightweight and that particular overgassed gas system, the gun itself was just not a great solution for me when compared to other peers on the market like the M16. So I was not impressed with the G36 in that regard. Now, the lightweight is impressive. The aesthetics are great. I mean, this is an iconic rifle. People love this gun. Having never shot it, just used it in video games and seen it on the big screen, they love the looks of this firearm. And I get it. It's a very good-looking firearm. But what did they really give us? I mean, they gave us the controls and things like that we needed. This has an old-school handguard. You know, they've come out with handguards with M-lock and stuff like that on them. Since then, this old-style optics setup and carrying handle, all that stuff was replaced later by more practical modern solutions, which this gun is more modular than this rifle is. This is more like the M16. The M16 has evolved nicely over the last 60 years, and the G36 did as well. It went from this configuration into a more modern configuration. But even the optics on this, I mean, I would imagine that the few German soldiers I've talked to in Germany that have served with it, the optics are horrible. The gun just in general is not well liked by a lot of the troops, and that's not uncommon in the military. U.S. military, a lot of people trash talk the M4 as well. But it feels plasticky, cheap. They would say that it overheats. Some of them, I've heard them say that to me. Of course, there was this big flap in Germany and all that stuff with investigations, but it just wasn't very well received. And my concerns with the gun is the heavy use of polymers with things like even the latches, The lower mechanism is just held in place by pins, which is typical with HK, but the polymer wears very quickly, faster than steel does, and so they become sloppy and loose fitting. They don't inspire confidence. When you pick this thing up, you're surprised by its lightweight, but then you start to look at it and feel it, and you're like, huh, this isn't anything like an AR-15. AR-15 seems infinitely more durable. Now, I'm not saying this is not durable. It's just the impression that it's cheap, right? But it's HK design, so it's a solid design. It's just, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this extensive use of polymers. And when you get inside of the gun, I mean, the whole receiver, handguard, stock, lower receiver, carrying handle, all of this is polymer. It just feels like I could take it and smack it on a table and break something. And so that was my biggest concern with the G36. I'm not saying you could break it. Okay, folks, I know people are like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Mac. I've never broken one. It's just that's the perception that you get. But again, perceptions aren't necessarily reality. I remember all the conversations about people going from the M14 to the M16. Wood and steel, that's all we want. Aluminum and plastic is junk. It'll break, it'll wear out. But that ain't the case. It's kind of the standard right now, although we're moving towards more guns like polymer, Glock and stuff like that, SIG, Smith & Wesson. Everybody has a polymer weapon now, especially in handguns. So the G36, its ergonomics improved. You get a selector lever here, like, you know, very common. I would say it's AR-15-ish in its location. And then you have your mag release, which is a European thing, you know, with the AK style flapper release. I don't have a problem with that. It's actually pretty natural to strip a magazine out and put a new one in. The charging handle is kind of unique. So it just kind of flops around, but it can be charged from either side. So the goal there obviously was to be ambidextrous. So you have the selector levers on both sides, and the charging handle will pop out on both sides, but it only ejects on this side. But it does have a brass deflector, so it won't be a problem for left-handed shooters. The folding stock, so this is an improvement, many people will say, over something like the M16 that requires a buffer tube out there, very much a shorter weapon, so when you go to stow it, this is a much shorter, handier package than the M16 M4. And yeah, I mean, reasonably accurate, reliable. I've never had a problem with them. But yeah, I still prefer this. Now, this has some shortages. One of the things that we were talking about before we started filming was, like this has the more modular ability to put different sighting systems on it. This, back in the day, had this big gaudy claw that clamped over the receiver that put the optics way high on the gun. It was just kind of an afterthought. And today, you'll have companies like PTR and Zenith and stuff like that. They've put welded rails on top of the receiver, so you get a pick rail up here. There's different handguards that are available now out there for customization on the third party market. So you can update these. But what they don't have is a last round bolt hole open, and you can switch this over to a paddle release if you want to make it a bit more ergonomic. But the charging handle is definitely structured for a right-handed shooter because it's on the left-hand side of the receiver, is not reversible. So I get some of the improvements that they did to the G36. It was a well thought out system, but in my opinion, the G41 would have been a better solution. I would have chosen the G41 over this because it just seems to be a more robust weapon, and that would have evolved nicely through the years. The G36 is already out of service with the Germans. They're moving over to a 416 type rifle from H&K. So it's just kind of weird. The gun did stay in service for a couple of decades, but it was wrapped up in controversy the entire time. And finally, the Germans are following the French and other countries that are switching over to some variation of the 416. All right, let's take a look at the MP5. All right, MP5 UMP, or USC. So much like the G36, the Germans didn't want to give us, the Americans, a proper G36 semi-automatic, and they didn't want to give us a proper UMP semi-automatic. They gave us the USC. Once again, 10-round magazines, stupid thumbhole furniture. It has to be converted into this, and once again, this is a Tommy-built gun based on the USC converted into a 9mm UMP. Okay? So, semi-automatic, and yes, it still has a 60-inch barrel. I've never SBR'd it. I honestly don't like shooting the thing. It's just horrible compared to just about every other 9mm PCC I have. I mean, they're just not good guns. And so, the MP5, classic, iconic, loved, still manufactured by HK. And I don't think this thing's going away anytime soon. Yes, it's heavier. This thing is comically lightweight. I mean, if I had this with a proper short barrel on it, this thing would not even seem like a real firearm. It's that lightweight. And that's one of the upsides to the polymer. But once again, we have the entire receiver, upper, lower stock, everything made out of polymer. The thing that kind of kills this gun for me isn't just the polymer, because the polymer on this, in my experience, is bad. Matter of fact, the second USC that I got, I did a video on it. I broke the front sight just having it in the bag in the Jeep. It bumped something and the polymer front sight cracked and broke. So the polymer on this particular gun, I haven't done it to a G36, but I'm not very rough on them either. I, without even trying, broke my USC. Broke the polymer front sight. Now, I got on the HK website. It's just a roll pin. I replaced it. No big deal. But it broke. A sight just snapped off because it was in a case. Not impressive. But what they did bring to the market with this was you get the, the ambi controls, which you can do to the MP5. This is the straight blowback, and that's what just kills it for me. That's the deal breaker on this gun for me. If this was a roller delayed firearm, I think that would be infinitely more interesting and probably softer shooting, and maybe I would like it more, with the exception of some of the polymer concerns I have. But the blowback on this just destroys it. This goes from a soft shooting, very controllable weapon to this thing, which recoils like a 5.56. It's just this jarring, even in semi-automatic. It's like every time you fire, it just jars. And I fired them on fully automatic, and once again, because of the bad recoil impulse, the sights just disappear. On the MP5, you can keep your sights on the target. They're very controllable. I've shot little tiny mag dump groups of the things. Not so much with the USC. Now, it can be controlled with practice, but it's just not a good gun. But what you do get with this, which you had with the MP5, is a side-folding polymer stock. You get ambi fire controls. You still have the charging handle over here, so this wasn't really improved. Very much a right-handed shooter thing. No provisions for switching it, so I don't get that. This little hook right here is where the stock comes up and kind of pops over. It just seems so cheap. It's like the Germans went from elegance and over-engineering to ugliness, cheapness, and cutting every corner imaginable. But these things weren't like $400. They were still expensive in the grand scheme of things. Maybe less expensive than the MP5, but yeah. So the blowback nature of this, the simple blowback, is what kills it for me. Now, you do have last round hold open on this. It uses magazines, 30-round flavor. You can convert this from 9mm to 40 Smith & Wesson to 45 with a bolt and barrel swap and a magazine swap. So, I mean, it's somewhat modular in that regard, but aside from the lightweight, it just doesn't really bring anything to the table. I've shot these things in 40, and it was beyond horrific. I was at a range day, I think, at one of the early Iraq veteran shoots, and they had one there, and that's where I first shot the 40. I can't remember who brought it out. I think it was another creator. But I was just blown away by how bad it was in 40. 9mm is a bit more manageable. 45 would be just like 40, if not worse. Wildly uncontrollable. Not uncontrollable. You can control them. It's just the recoil impulse is not as good as something like this. They even made these darn things in 10mm. Really wish I could shoot one. Never have. But anyway, the only real thing that this brings to the table, in my opinion, is the incredible lightweight. I just wish, as I already said, this thing was roller delayed. And I think that would have totally changed the game for these. I think they could have come up with a different charging system that would have given them ambi capabilities, and rework the polymer, put more metal on things that might actually break. But it didn't do well. So the G36 was adopted by the German military and other countries. I know Mexico uses them, and other countries did use the G36. So it actually gained some acceptance in military circles. The UMP did too, law enforcement circles. I'm sure there's some military groups out there that used them, but the thing just floundered. To that end, the MP5 is still made. HK is back to selling them on the civilian market again, and I'm sure countries are ordering them for their militaries and law enforcement groups and stuff like that. So people are probably still choosing this. I don't know what the sales numbers look like, this over this. You don't even hear this being discussed much anymore. It just kind of fizzled out, and rightfully so. It's not a good gun, in my opinion, as compared to other products that are on the market. Not just from H&K. But, yeah, I would not choose the G36 over an M16. I wouldn't choose the G36 over just about anything, not even an AK. I'm not that impressed by it. And this, like I said, I could SBR it. That was my original intent, but I dislike shooting it so much. I never bring it out except to make videos like today. So why invest the money into it when all it does is really sit? And so, I mean, the reason it's an SBR is because I actually shoot it and enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, let us know what you think down in the comments. What do you think of the G36? What do you think of the UMP? Is it an interesting firearm? Do you like them? Do you prefer them over their counterparts, like the M16 Do you prefer the G36 over it? Do you prefer the UMP over the MP5 or any other SMG or PCC out there? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. All right, guys, we greatly appreciate you watching. Thank you for 17 years of support. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is become part of our Patreon family. There's a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the thanks and support button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Hit either one of those buttons. You can help support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Please swing by, check out Copper. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.